as we continue to look forward, as we have now for several lessons, we have begun the lesson with 2 Peter 3:14 many times. And there it says, "Therefore, beloved, looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found by him in peace, without spot and blameless." So, in the end, we want to be those that are found to be without spot, without blame, those that have sought to do the will of the Lord in his church that he owns, that he established. And so as we go through our day-to-day life moving forward, we want to think on those things. So far, again, we've talked about looking forward with emphasis on the job of the individual, asking the question, what is my task? And then we talked about the work of the local church, and then the church structure. We looked at the job of deacons last week, and the scriptural need for them, and the preparation that we each need to take to ourselves, that we might be able to fulfill the roles that are asked for by the Lord in his church. So we want to look inwardly and see if we can meet those needs, and then also, if not yet, how can we pattern our steps? We just sang a song that had the words in it, "How wonderful to walk in the footsteps of Jesus." Did I get that right? And pretty close. And the idea, though, is that we are putting our footsteps in the place where the Lord would have us to. And as we look forward, we understand that he desires that his church have elders and deacons. So we need to look and see again within ourselves: can we fulfill that need now, or can we work towards that individually? Can I do something? Can I pattern my life in such a way that I can fulfill such a role as the Lord desires? So as we have been looking so far, we're going to kind of start talking about elders and the relationship of elders to the church. So once I get the clicker to do what I want it to do. So thinking about the relationship of elders to the church, one of the things that they do is to tend the flock. And 1 Peter 5, starting at verse 1, says, "The elders who are among you, I exhort. I, who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly." So, again, those that are in the place of an elder in that position, they are to look after the flock, look after those that they are among. As we gather together here today, we are the Lord's church that meets here in Medina. And as we are amongst each other, we need to look together with one another to make sure that the things are going according to the will of the Lord. Another aspect of this relationship between elders and the church is that they should rule over and watch out for the local church. Hebrews 13 and verse 17, "Obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you." It is fitting that we have those that are in a position to be watchful. We do that in business. We have those that watch over the needs of a business, whether it be the financial needs. We have those that watch over those needs in business normally. We have those that watch over the physical needs, how many supplies do we need to order and so on. But with the church, it's a spiritual oversight, looking out for the souls of those that are among them. And again, to rule over and watch out for the local church. That is the relationship between elders and the church. And also to exercise oversight. Exercise the oversight of the local church. Let's, in 1 Peter 5 and verse 2, we already read, to shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly. But exercise that oversight. Be those that are watching out. We have, many of us may have had, or at one time, or maybe have now, an animal, a dog at our house that watches over things, that knows when things are going on. We don't currently, but my neighbors across the road have 2 dogs, and all you need to do is get halfway across the road, and they know you're there. And they are watching. And they are watching for anything that might go awry in their area. The duties of a watchman are defined in Ezekiel. If we go to Ezekiel 3, starting at verse 16 in Ezekiel 3, starting at verse 16, now it came to pass at the end of 7 days that the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Therefore hear a word from my mouth, and give them warning from me. When I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, that same wicked man shall die in his iniquity. But his blood I will require at your hand. Yet if you warn the wicked, and he does not turn from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. Again, when a righteous man turns from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die. But you did not give him warning. He shall die in his sin, and his righteousness which he has done shall not be remembered. But his blood I will require at your hand. Nevertheless, if you warn the righteous man that the righteous should not sin, and he does not sin, he shall surely live, because he took warning. Also, you will have delivered your soul. So that speaks to the graveness of the job of an overseer, of the watchman, and gives us a foreshadowing back there in Ezekiel of what the Lord desires, again, within the confines of his church. And it's serious. Each and every one of us should take heed to that kind of thinking, that we should be watchful for one another. But also, when there are elders in a church, you have those that are tasked with watching out for things, watching out for those dangers that might be coming, that maybe others don't see. And when you have those that are tasked with just seeking out and looking for those things that might be a stumbling block, those things that might be creeping in, where otherwise those things are just allowed to creep in and then corrupt that which the Lord died to establish, and those that are saved therein. The duties again of that watchman are to hear the word of God and to warn those who sin, and to admonish. Again, going back to 1 Peter 5 verse 2 to point that out. To admonish, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly. And we need to be those that are willing to receive that instruction as well, and ready to receive that admonishment when and if it comes our way. To be examples. Those that are tasked with being overseers of the Lord's church should be a good example to those around them. Those that can look upon them and see someone who is striving every day to walk in those steps of Jesus, if you will, and giving a good example and helping to bring the rest with them. Not that it's not each and every one of our jobs to do these things, but again, in having those that are in that position, we have an example, hopefully, of those that are seeking after the Lord. And again, we'll get into it a little bit more, but those that are elders are not put up on some pedestal to the degree that they can't be admonished themselves. The brethren should watch out as well to make sure that just the same as any other brother, that those that are in the place of elder also are walking uprightly. It's again a very grave responsibility. It is something that is not to be taken lightly. It is one that when you take on that responsibility, you realize that, as it says there in Ezekiel, the lost's blood is on you, and that is not speaking directly of elders in the first century church or the church that we know today, but nonetheless it gives us a glimpse into the mind of God and what He expects of those that are watchmen, and those that are overseers are watchmen, and we understand that those are the same grave expectations that the Lord has for elders in His church today. It's not to be taken lightly by those that may seek that office. We're told in the Scriptures that if a man desires to do the work of an elder, that it's a good thing. So in all these things that I'm saying, I'm not trying to scare anybody away, but it is a good thing. But realize that it's a serious thing. It's a serious matter, because the Lord cares about each and every soul. He cares about each and every one. Secondly, as we think about this relationship of elders in the church, we want to think about that relationship of the church towards elders, and kind of turning things around there. The eldership would have a responsibility to those that they oversee, but the church, the assembly, also there's an expectation there. The church should know the elders and to esteem them. In 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 12, beginning, "But we ask you, brothers and sisters, to recognize those who diligently labor among you and are in leadership over you in the Lord, and give you instruction, that you regard them very highly and love because of their work. Live in peace with one another." Over the years, having talked to those that were elders in the church, I've been privy to a little bit of a few accounts of things that have gone on, the troubles that have come the way of those that were in the place of an elder over a local assembly, and sometimes it's been rough. Those that are among the flock became thorns in the sides of some, and that's not the way that it's supposed to be. The elder has a responsibility not to be hard-handed and to cause thorns to grow, but those of us in the assembly also need to make sure that we're not purposely growing to be thorns, and that's something that each and every one of us should take to heart, and to remember that the Lord desired that this structure be in His church, and it's our job to work well with that plan. The relationship also between the church and the elders requires a submission to their rule. Hebrews 13, verse 7 says, "Remember those who led you, who spoke the word of God to you, and considering the result of their way of life, imitate their faith." So, as we think of those that have gone on before us, those that have been leaders in the church that we've been among, looking at the result of their way of life, to imitate their faith. And again, as we mentioned this morning in the Bible study time, that we don't do this, blindly, but we look to the Word. Each and every one should be looking to the Word to see if the things that you're hearing are so, to also to make your decisions and to see those around you, and perhaps That's how those that are in a position of leadership would be catching things that would be coming towards the brethren that would be harmful, those stumbling blocks, because they'd be looking into the Word as well and catching those things that are awry, that are just off, that are not according to the will of the Lord. Each and every one of us has that ability, has that job in and of ourselves. But we are to obey and submit to their rule insofar as it is in alignment with the Scriptures, and not blindly follow. All of the religious trouble and the wreck, the havoc that we see out in the religious world, it's come from those that followed a person blindly. You have a person that creates themselves to be a figurehead, and they put on a fancy robe, perhaps a fancy hat. Perhaps they know just what to say, and they can drag the unwitting into their fold, and people follow them blindly. I mean, we can step outside of the confines of the religious world and see in political organizations how people have just blindly followed those that perhaps could speak well, perhaps were convincing. There's a whole lot more to it than just listening to a convincing speaker. We need to look into the Word ourselves to make sure that these things are so. And so we do need to obey and submit to the rule of the elders, but again, none of us should be blindly following anybody. We need to have our eyes open and studying to show ourselves approved. Also, the church needs to support them in their work. It is hard work. Sleepless nights may be involved in a situation of oversight. There come times when needs arise, and those that are in the within the confines of an eldership are those that should be called on at that time, and we should support them and respect the gravity of their job. Sometimes decisions are made, and perhaps we, in our minds, think of maybe a better way that it could be done. But we need to stop and ask ourselves, is it unscriptural? Is it something that is wrong? And if not, then we need to be those that support them in their work and be willing to be a help and not a hindrance. Again, to reprove them if they sin. 1 Timothy 5, verse 20 says, "Those who continue in sin rebuke in the presence of all, so that the rest also will be fearful of sinning." And to read verse 19, should have done that in the beginning, but 1 Timothy 5 and verse 19, "Do not accept an accusation against an elder, except on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses." There's the gravity of that office and that high esteem that the brethren put upon those that take that role. But realizing that the elder is not exempt from this next verse where it says, "Those who continue in sin rebuke in the presence of all, so that the rest also will be fearful of sinning." The eldership sometimes, I think, becomes something like you see in some of those religious organizations that I spoke of a moment ago. And they're elevated to such a place that they begin to be unapproachable. They begin to be something that is above where they really are. In the end, they're just people. In the end, each and every one of us are just human beings on this earth, hopefully seeking to find our way to heaven through the care and admonition of the Lord. And we need not lose sight of that. And we need not elevate anybody above their rightful station in life. But we do need to understand that there is a respect due there, but nonetheless, they also need to be watched out for. I mean, as brethren, we watch out for each other, and that's something that I'm thankful for, that that those that have brought correction into my life in the past. And wouldn't you want that same thing if you were in a position of leadership? You'd want someone to help you along the way too if you stumble. So we do need to keep those things in mind. As with it was mentioning about, we would do this with any brethren. Going to Matthew 8 at verse 15. Now, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. Now, as we mentioned, do not receive an accusation against an elder except if by 2 or 3 bring it. And that, again, already I kind of jumped ahead there. It speaks to the gravity of that office. But also, we need not be afraid to call upon them. When times get tough, when we need a spiritual shoulder to lean on, when we have a tough question in life, if we start starting to question something and we just need someone that we can trust to give us a wise answer, a scriptural answer, to be those that again shepherd the flock. A shepherd can't shepherd unless the sheep is willing to come to him. And so we need to not be afraid to call upon them, to make a good use of them. It's a blessing to have such people among you. James 5 of verse 14 says, is anyone among you sick? Then he must call for the elders of the church, and they are to pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. The idea there that the elders can lend some spiritual help and be those that are supportive of the brethren. We need not be afraid to call upon them. When I was in school, when I was in college, oftentimes being shy as I am, it's really mind-boggling that I'm standing before a group of people and talking. If you knew me growing up, it would not be the case. But I would be afraid to talk to the teacher. I would have a question, but I didn't want to ask. And I didn't learn from that. I never learned anything by not asking. And when we have amongst us brethren that are willing to help, that are in fact charged with that duty, we need not be afraid to make good use of them and to ask for the help when it is needed. Just the same as at the end of every lesson, the end of every service, we have an invitation. And I think many times we perhaps could use the prayers of the saints, but we become afraid to make things known. We become afraid that people will look upon us in a downward fashion, and that we would, it's that social pressure that still plagues us when we're adults sometimes. And so we need not be afraid to lean on one another, especially those that are elders. As much as is under your control, make their task one of joy and not grief. Speaking of Hebrews 13 at verse 17. Again, it's unfortunate. It should not be in the Lord's church, but I have known of situations where it seemed as though some brethren made it their daily job to make trouble for those that were in a place of leadership. And that should not be so. And in retrospect and in thinking back, it was part of a process of falling away for those that were making trouble. It was their way out, if you will, to bring up an issue, to cause a stir so that they could, in their own minds, rightly get angry and leave. That was often the situation, and that's not the way that it should be. And as mentioned before, as parents, we desire that our children do what we say, not because out of some compulsion, but because they love us and understand that we are leading them down the safer path. And the same thing applies to Christ. He desires that each and every one of us follow him, not out of some compulsion, but because we love him and that we desire his truth that we desire the hope that he offers us. And part of his offering of that hope involves the structure of the Lord's church. He knows what he's doing, and when he laid forth that groundwork and told through his word how his church should be structured, he knew what he was doing. And we should follow that as closely as possible and be willing to take part in those blessings that the Lord has bestowed on his people. In conclusion, when elders and members mutually respect one another and live up to their responsibilities, again, there's responsibilities of brethren and there's responsibilities of those in a place of leadership. The wisdom of God's plan for the local church brings not only joy, peace, and unity, but also growth, both spiritually and most times numerically. If we look around, we often mention how, just in general, the religious world is waning, it seems. So the numbers of people that have spiritual things in mind are waning. And that's, to a great degree, that's our fault as brethren, as a whole. We haven't been out there. We haven't been reaching out to those around us as much as we should. And again, going back to, the relationship of elders and the brethren, it's not just the preacher's job to preach and teach the gospel. It's not just the elder's job. It's everybody's job to do those things. And we all need to do, every day when we wake up, try to find a way to do a little bit more so that we can reach out to others. And if we do that and we share the truth with them and let the word do what it's supposed to do, I'm convinced that the numbers will follow, that we will see more souls in our local area interested in spiritual things. But we must be the ones, because we're charged to do that. We live here, and this is the assembly of the Lord's church in this area, and that's our job. And we should follow the Lord's groundwork, if you will. This responsibility, this requirement of God is for all mankind. Everybody is in a position where they must put on Christ. And we do that first by hearing the word. And that's the important thing that we need to remember, that we came to the knowledge of truth through hearing the word. Our neighbor is going to come to the knowledge of truth by hearing the word. If they don't hear the word, then there's not much chance of that. That after hearing the word and reading it and studying it and coming to understand, we believe that Christ is who he says he is. And just like in Acts 8, the Ethiopian eunuch, when he came to that realization, he became cognizant of it, and he did what he was supposed to do. He repented of his sins and confessed Christ before Philip, and was baptized for the remission of sins. And that's the same plan then. It's the same plan now in this dispensation of time. That's what all men must do, what all mankind must do if they have any hope of the hope of heaven after this life. We must put on Christ. In Acts 22:16, it mentions, "Why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord." We must call on the name of the Lord, each and every one. And after that, we've been talking about the church, and we have those that put on Christ, they become part of the church. And when you think about the church, in general, we're speaking of every saved individual. But locally, we have these assemblies of saints, because we can't all, the church the world over, meet in one central location. That's just impossible, travel-wise. So, as it was in the first century, as the Philippians had their own church in Philippi, there was a church at Rome. We can go on down the list. In Ephesus, there were those assemblies of the saints. And in each one of those places, those people work together. And so as we think about that, when we put on Christ, then it is our duty to find a place that fits the bill of being the Lord's church, that is within reach of us, and connect ourselves together with them and do the work together. As the letters written to those churches that we read of in the Scriptures, they are telling them what that group should be doing and commending them for the good things that they're doing and so on. And that gives us an example of a group of people in a place connected together and working together. After all, we're speaking about elders and deacons. You have to have a group of people that understands together and they're of the same mind that, yes, I'm here, I'm going to work together. And we need to be willing to make those statements and in effect, attach ourselves to a local assembly. We often use the word membership, and are you a member of the Lord's church? And I don't know if that's the best word to use, but we certainly should be those that are attached one to another. And so that we can be effective together, so that we can be led together as the Lord desires. So for those that have put on Christ and that are seeking every day to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, to again quote the song that we sung just a few moments ago, we must remain faithful. Revelation 2:10, of course, reminds us that we have to be faithful until death if we are to receive that crown of life. So I ask you today, is there anybody among us here that needs to put on Christ in baptism? We can facilitate that happening. Is there anybody that needs to ask for the prayers of the saints? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because we are, again, a family together. And we, each one, desire to be a support one to another. So don't be afraid to do that if that is the need that you have right now. If you're subject to the invitation, please come forward as we stand and sing.